boys and girls. We are still talking about different genres. Last week we were working on them, so let's review them really quick. So we learned that there's some major ones, right? There's fiction and nonfiction. And fiction books we know tell stories and are made up, right? And nonfiction are teaching books and they give us facts and information. Okay, but underneath those, there are different genres. So underneath fiction, you could have a folktale, a fantasy, or realistic fiction. There's even more, but these are just some of the ones we've talked about so far. So remember, a folktale could be like a fairy tale or a fable. Those are traditional stories. They're old stories. They've been told over and over again. They're going to be those familiar stories like Little Red Riding Hood, Cinderella, The Three Little Pigs, okay? But then there's a fantasy, and a fantasy has some of the things that fairy tales and folk tales have, but they are not old stories, they're new stories, and they definitely always have impossible things in them, like magic, dragons, unicorns, things like that, ogres, right, monsters. Those would be fantasies. And then there's realistic fiction, and that's when a story has characters in it that are made up. They're not real people, but the stories could happen in real life. And maybe they're even based on real life. In fact, in writing, we're getting ready to start writing fiction, and we're going to be doing realistic fiction because we're going to be using a story of something that happened in our own life and turning it into a made-up story, right? Fiction, by adding characters that we make up. So that's realistic fiction. Then we learned about nonfiction, right? We learned about the biographies. Biographies are books that teach us about somebody's life. They give us facts, they give us dates, they give us photographs, and they teach us about their life, and they're usually about famous people. So today we're going to add a different genre that has its own section down here, and it's called poetry. You guys know poetry. We worked on it for a little while. We listened to some poems. We wrote some poems. You know some things about poems. You know that poems usually have, and let's kind of write and add some things. Let's see, I need a new color. Let's do green again. It's been a while since we did green. Okay, so poetry usually has like some kind of beat, right? It has some kind of beat when you say it correctly, like songs are usually written in poetry forms, right? So it's got a beat to it when you read it correctly. It can rhyme, but it doesn't have to, okay? It can rhyme or not. All right? Poetry is always usually written in things called stanzas. I don't know if I gave those names for you. They're like chunks of words, like a chunk and then a space and then another chunk. Let me see if I can find an example of a stanza here really quick. Here, this one's written in stanzas, okay? Let me show you better here. This is a stanza. See how it's a chunk of 3 lines? Here's a chunk of 3 lines. Here's a chunk of 3 lines, okay? Those are stanzas. So that's different. In books, it's written in paragraphs. These are called stanzas. Now, here's the tricky thing that I'm going to show you right now. The reason poetry goes in its own spot is because poetry can be fiction or nonfiction. So that means in the poetry, it could tell us a story, it could teach us, or it could do none of those. It could just be a poem, okay? So let me give you an example of one that tells a story, okay? This one's called a narrative poem. You all know it, The Night Before Christmas, okay? It is a poem. We can tell it's a poem. It rhymes, it has a beat, it has a rhythm. This one's written a little bit differently. But look, 'twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. This is telling a story, and it rhymes and it has a beat, doesn't it? It's telling you that the stockings are hung, it's the night before Christmas, and you can even tell what happens next in the story. The kids are sleeping, the mama and the daddy are sleeping, right? Then the daddy wakes up because he heard a noise. He goes to the window, and then what does he see? He sees Santa Claus, right, coming down, and he stops on the roof, right? Here he is on the rooftop. It tells a story. It goes in order. You might not have realized that before, but this is a poem, and it tells a story of what happens the night before Christmas, and it's a very popular narrative poem. Okay, well then we have poems that can actually teach us. So I'm going to read you this one really quick. This is from a photocopy of a book, but it's called Bat Patrol. Quickly and quietly, the bat patrols the night, sending an invisible song, echoing like ripples on a pond, chasing moths around a streetlight. Quickly and quietly, the bat patrols the night. Now, is this coming straight out and giving you facts? No, but you have to dig. They're there. It's not telling you a story. It is explaining that bats, when they patrol, they go quickly and quietly, right? They send an invisible song. What invisible song? Did you know that bats do this? They make a sound that's invisible. It's called their echolocation. And it bounces off things, echoing like ripples on a pond. That's what the echolocation does. And they chase moths around a streetlight. Quickly and quietly, he patrols the night. They are teaching us facts about a bat in a poem. Okay? They're hidden in there, but they're there. So poems can be teaching, and they can be storytelling, or they could just be silly and funny, right? We know that because we wrote some silly and funny poems that didn't tell a story. Okay, so they can just rhyme. So I'm going to be giving you a poem, or maybe a collection of poems from Epic. We'll see what I can find, and I'll put it on the student page. I want you to listen to those, and then I want you to tell me why you know that that book is poetry. Maybe you notice it has a beat. Maybe it rhymes. Maybe it has stanzas. Maybe it tells a story, but it's written with a beat. So try to tell me at least 2 reasons why that book fits in the poetry genre, okay? I hope you guys are remembering all these, because pretty soon I'm going to give you a whole bunch of books and I'm going to make you sort them into categories. Okay?